Hi, my name is Marvin Kaye. I'm an actor, writer, pickler, father, originally from Winnipeg, and I still do all of the things I just mentioned, and sometimes I get paid for it.
Awesome. Welcome to the Dead Man Walking Podcast. I am your host, Repeatedly Dead Fred, author of the medical memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times, which is actually what happened to me. And that's how I got the name Repeatedly Dead Fred. Repeatedly Dead Fred. And today we have Marvin Kaye. And oddly, we grew up about 6 blocks from each other in Winnipeg and had no idea. Marvin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Nice to meet a neighbor I should have met 30, 40, 50 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's odd that you came to me through Miles Shane,
Yeah.
who was like 10 blocks from me. We also never met. I knew his dad, and we
Maybe this
just
is
found
about
out.
you. Did you ever leave the house, or were you just
Yeah,
trapped in there?
only when I had to play hockey.
Oh,
That's
okay.
when I got out. So, um, but my cousin in North Carolina sent me a bit of the family tree. It turns out Miles and I are third cousins.
No, really?
Yeah,
So you lived in the same town, you lived very close to each other. You've just recently been acquainted with each other and you just realized now that you're related?
yeah. I mean, my parents had no clue, no mention of it.
Wow.
Um,
Maybe we should do a genetic test and see what happens.
sure. But we both have alopecia, so
Oh, do.
there's a good
Well,
chance.
we'll see.
I mean, unless you're professionally groomed.
Well, no, I like to. I've been doing it so long now that I like to think of myself as a professional. Like yesterday, when I did the full shave on the head, it felt so smooth. I had my wife just touch it over and over and over again. It was lovely.
This sounds like an area of fetishism that we might not want to cover on today's show.
Or maybe we'll just dive right into that, and that'll be the whole show. It might be
Yes.
more interesting than anything else we'll talk about.
Well, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what you've done? You've been in a whole bunch of TV shows. You write, you produce, you've won awards. A lot of people would like your career.
Well, it's funny, when you look through, when you go down your resume, or when I go down my resume, I look and I see these things and I go, wow, I've done a whole bunch of stuff. Like I created a television show. It ran for 4 seasons. We won every award you can win in Canada. It's still on some channels, Tubi, and things like that. I've been in an Academy Award winning best movie, and that freaks me out a bit because there's not a lot of people that can say that, and I never thought
Hmm.
I'd be able to be one of the people who say that. I've been in tons of television shows and other movies, but when you wake up in the morning and you're trying to figure out what your agenda is going to be for the day, none of that makes any difference. It's all I can think is, what am I doing with my life? And it doesn't matter that I have all these huge credits, and so I have to actually write it down sometimes every day to remind myself, yes, you have done some incredible stuff that you never thought you'd ever get done. So I'm grateful for that, but and mostly I'm grateful just to have a wonderful wife and a kid who are totally supportive. I mean, that's pretty much the life of a writer, actor, artist type. And the more people I ask about who are in the industry that I ask about it, almost everybody has the same reaction, no matter what their success or failures are. So
So,
it's kind of crazy.
do you come across a fair number of Winnipeggers in your professional travels?
Yes and no. It's very strange. Like Winnipeg, the people that are still there and that are in the industry, they're very friendly with each other. Everybody knows everyone, and when I left, everybody that comes out, you have like a connection to them and 6 or 7 other people. So
Mm.
I do meet people from Winnipeg. They usually come out to Toronto and then sometimes they go back or go to Vancouver or something like that. But Winnipeg, it's the middle of the country. It seems sometimes to be the middle of the universe.
Yeah.
And yeah, I connect with a lot of people in Winnipeg. And I was just watching a movie and Winnipeg got mentioned in it like 4 times. And I was like, I can't, sometimes it just makes me giggle because when I
Mm.
left Winnipeg, I thought I'd never want to go back to Winnipeg. And then I wrote a series that was based in Winnipeg. And
Mhm.
a lot of my success has come because of either my avoiding going back to Winnipeg or this longing or this sentimental feeling I have about the city.
Yeah. I remember coming back to Toronto at the airport, and I'm waiting to collect my luggage, and I see this woman carrying a genie's cake,
Hmm.
obviously, and you probably know her too. She's a filmmaker, um, Burstein, Burston.
It could be. I mean, but almost
Does
everybody who spent any time in Winnipeg knows that bakery. It was sold recently. I think it has new owners, but I know it's still there and it's still going. But yeah,
Yeah. So if you don't know Jeannie's Bakery in Winnipeg, um, it's a local phenom that's been around for probably 80 years.
yeah. No, there's a couple of places like that. The Thunderbird restaurant I think has new ownership, but that was like just up the street from where I used to live, and my dad we would
Mhm.
go there all the time. The guys who owned it, I think he retired about 5 or 8 years ago and sold it, but it's still going strong as far as I know.
Mhm.
People can correct me if they want. And
Yeah,
Ray and
fact
Jerry's.
check us.
Ray and
Fact check
Jerry's.
us. Yes, had a few meals there.
It's like walking through a time machine when you walk into that restaurant. It's fantastic.
Yeah, they still have the vinyl on the seats.
Yeah, yeah. No, the last I was there, I was in Winnipeg for a few days back in December, and yeah, I went there and I sat. I had a martini, and I just looked around, going, "This place is like a time capsule. Nothing changes here, and that's part of their mandate. They want to
Mhm.
keep it the same and look the same, and it just feels like you're in a little mini universe whenever you go
Mhm.
there. And there's just something really charming about it. It just makes me smile. My dad used to
Yeah,
hang out there all the time and stuff like that. Yeah.
people love nostalgia.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, you're sucked into this feeling like you're in a time when everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be
Hmm.
fine. Yeah.
So, were you a theater geek growing up?
No, I was a bit of a music geek,
Okay.
and my career started. Well, my training started in music. My mother was a bit of a singer, and I sang quite a bit. My job from grade 7 or grade 6 to till I graduated, till I went, actually, even when I went to university, I was singing in a synagogue choir. They actually paid me, and they paid everybody, not just me. But that was most of my employment. And then I went and I studied music at McGill. I got into the voice program there for a couple of years and did all my performance courses, and then left and then went to study theater at Studio 58 in Vancouver. So music was actually my entry into the field, but I was always doing a little bit of drama and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people would pay me not to sing.
Well, but that could be a career too.
Mhm.
It's kind of a bully career, but that's fine. And actually, I just got back. I hadn't been on stage as an actor or a performer in over a dozen years, and I just did a musical. I was in St. John's, uh, Newfoundland, and
Mhm.
Hamilton. I did this new musical called Hymnal. The contract
Mhm.
just ended a couple of weeks ago, and that was just like I was just trying to scramble my brain and rejuvenate some old feelings, and yeah, so it started off in music, led to theater, which led me into film and TV and movies and things like that. That was
How
the path.
how hard was it to get back on stage and find your voice?
Um, Uh, it was more about the anxiety of like, well, can I even memorize a whole script again?
Mhm.
So that was big. The hardest part really was coming into the cast and realizing, oh, I'm the elder here now. And I was looking around going, oh, and people were coming to me and asking me like, well, why did you stop doing theater? And I'm looking around and they're all in their 20s and 30s. And I'm like, oh, right. It's been over a dozen years and
Mm.
I'm a father and I'm a thing. And it was like, it was a realization of how much time had passed and where like the expanse of my career and my life, which is attached to my career, and that was the most interesting part on a personal level. And then yeah, being on stage and just remembering how to perform in front of an audience like it was interesting, and I hadn't done that in over a dozen years, so that was fun. And then I was singing on stage for the first time in like yeah 12 15 years, something like that. So that
Mhm.
was interesting. But I was far like the youngins. I can say that now. The youngins that were there, their voices, they were all like mostly newly graduated people with these super beautiful, strong, well carved out voices that just some of them
Mhm.
were hypnotically beautiful, beautiful music. I
Yeah,
felt like, oh, I was feeling like, oh, maybe there's a reason if I'm going to come back, I got to get back into shape. It took a long time for me to feel comfortable singing again.
I think kids today get a lot more voice training than kids
Oh
back in
yeah,
our day.
well, and yeah, and they don't hit pause for 12 or 15 years. So not these ones at least. So that was interesting to hear like these guys and these girls like go hit the high notes and belt out these songs, and I was like, wow, I'm really out of practice. These guys are good. These
Yeah.
guys are really, really, really good. But I hung out
So,
mostly with musicians growing up and all before I left to go to university and stuff. I was in the jazz scene in Winnipeg. That was what I liked to hang out, where I like to be.
so what smoky bar did you frequent there?
Well, there was what was it called,
The Blue Note?
the Blue Note. Yeah, I think that's gone now. That was that we were there like almost every weekend for a long, 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 long
Mhm.
time. The interesting thing is the guys I hung out with, most of them ended up becoming professional musicians. So I was actually in
Mhm.
a very elite kind of group that way. Like most of the time people graduate from high school and go off on their ways. But my friend John Sadoway, he eventually went to McGill, got his jazz degree, and he makes his living as a musician around the world. I have a friend Tony DiGregorio. He lives in Victoria now. He makes guitars, and he's a beautiful musician. Like a lot of those guys just ended up staying in the industry.
Mhm.
So I was blessed that way that I hung out with some real musicians even from a young age. So
Mhm.
there was a lot of that in my life.
I actually did a podcast with Rami Mays. I don't know if you know Rami. She's sort of a indie singer,
The name's
folk
very
rock.
familiar. Yeah.
She's a Winnipeg girl. Just came out
Yeah.
with her first album in a whole bunch of years, and we spent a
I,
lot
I
of time
gotta,
talking
I
about
gotta,
voice.
I gotta write that down now and you can take a listen after we're done here. Yeah. No, but yeah, most of the guys I know, like a lot of them are there's a couple of studio guys and they're teachers now and they've done that thing. But I moved, and the first gigs I ever got out of when I graduated from Studio 58 in Vancouver, I was doing all musical theater for the first five years or so. That's almost 90% of what I was getting. I
So
did the Charlottetown Festival. I was,
mhm.
that kind of stuff.
Is Studio 58 sort of like Canada's Juilliard?
I don't know what to compare it to. For me, I mean, I fought with them a lot, but they've pumped out some incredible artists that have had stellar careers. Um, so I don't know what to compare it to other than the fact that at least in Vancouver and BC on the west side of the country, it is probably one of the more well-known and well-respected theater programs in the country. But also, Toronto has its share, and of course, the National Theatre School in Montreal is very, very well known. But when you go to the West Coast, studio is there. Um, when I got in, I was like, great, I'm going to be on the coast. Uh, I'll be drinking and smoking pot and doing theater. What I was 18. Like, what else could you want out of life at that point? That
Mhm.
was it.
So let's go back to your TV show a bit, if we may.
Sure.
So what was it called?
The TV show was called Less Than Kind.
Okay.
And it was inspired by, well, it started, and well, I'm going to bring Studio 58 back in. I had written as a project in my last year, I'd written a one act play called They Have Mayonnaise in Montreal. And that was about me leaving. I'm the only kid who left home to go to school. And it was a big deal in the house at the time. And so I wrote this play about that, and the school studio put on the play as a they had foreplay was the name of the festival that they did next year,
Mhm.
and they put on four one act plays, and mine was one of them, and it got chosen that year as by the Vancouver papers and the critics there as one of the theater events of the season, even though it was like a student production, you know,
Mhm.
from a theater school and stuff. So it had a little something to it. And then years passed when after that, and I went on to, you know, struggle to be an actor and do other things. And there came a moment where I thought, I should take a look at this. And me and my friend Chris Shays Green, who was also a graduate of the school, looked at it, and we pitched it to actually Buffalo Gal Pictures in Winnipeg and another company here in Toronto, and they all liked it, and we ended up developing it and turning it into a television series that ran for 4 years. And the some of the talent that was attracted to the show, Mark McKinney from Kids in the Hall,
Mhm.
Gary Campbell, who was also from Kids in the Hall, they all came on board because they felt there was something there within the comedy and the drama of this family. And we all just had a little dinner about a week ago that a lot of the cast and the creatives on that show still hang out together and chat, and that's one of the most uh, heart thumpy bits of it for me, is like we did a show about my family that kind of created another family.
Mhm.
And even in Winnipeg, all of the cast and crew still know each other and hang out. They have Christmas dinners at each other's houses and stuff, and it that that was kind of incredible. And some really great actors came on board on that and have
Mhm.
done very well since then. Yeah, and some
Who
we sorry.
would
Uh,
be the most surprising actor that came on board?
the most surprising. Well, there's a guy, Ben Ayers, who is now huge in the Hallmark empire
Oh
of
yeah.
movies. He's doing tons of that. Uh, there's also Lisa DeRue, who is in Vancouver now. She's a regular on some of those movies and others. Tyler Johnston, who was a star of Letterkenny and
Mhm.
has done incredibly well. He was a regular on the series for three of the four seasons. Um, I'm trying to think of who else we had there. We've lost a few. Maury Chaikin, who was the
Mhm.
father on the show, who was very similar to my father, passed away in, I think it was just after the second season was shot. And
Mhm.
so we had to deal with the death of the patriarch in the family. And that
That's
was
always have to do with, when something real life impacts.
well, he got ill in the second season, and we dealt with that. What was interesting for me is because the show was about my relationship with my father, who, as I was leaving home to go to school, did get ill and eventually passed away while I was at theater school. And Maury had this explosive demeanor that my father had. Like, he loved, and he could be loving and antagonistic almost in the same explosion. And there was just something so charming about him. And when he started to get ill, it was very it was very weird for me to watch the guy who's playing my father, or inspired by my father to go through that. And then when we were about halfway through outlining and started the writing of the third season, when we got a knock on the writing room door that he had passed, which was a surprise because he had been actually getting better at the time. And we had to sit and rethink what the third season would be about. And there was this beautiful thing where we all sat around and we talked about what loss meant to us. And I mean, when my dad passed, there were these hilarious moments that
Mhm.
we would stare at each other in my family and stuff, and we would be like, should we be are we allowed to laugh now? Like, even when, you know what I mean? Like, somebody
Yeah.
passes and all of this other stuff comes up. There's a scene that didn't get shot in the pilot. I'm sorry, I'm a little babbly here, but that it had to get cut just for budget reasons, that everybody loved, and it was based on a real event where me and my brother had to go to the synagogue to pick out a plot for my father because he'd done no preparation. And so it was me, and the scene was me and my brother in the actual play. It was me and my brother were sitting there, and they had a map of the cemetery, and it
Mhm.
was January, so everything was frozen in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And he's pointing at the map, sorry for your loss and all of this. And he's like, you'll have to pick a plot. And we're like, well, Dad didn't like the sun. He liked shade. He hated, is there something under a tree? And we look at the map, and it's like, oh, yes. And then we pick one, and he's like, oh, that's a good spot. And then he pulls out like a walkie-talkie, the rabbi, and he hits it, and you're, and he's talking to a maintenance guy who's in the cemetery. And he's like, and he goes like A17. And he said, "Can you get to?" And you hear the guy on the other end going, "No, it's frozen over. There's no way we can get there. They got to do something." And so we were like, "Okay." We chose another one, and it's G14. Can you go to G? And you just hear the guy on the other side going, "No, everything is frozen. They have to choose something that's in the fucking right." And we were like, and the rabbi's like, they're in the room with me right now, and you just hear this. Sorry for your loss. And you're like, okay, and then we finally pick one, and this happened in this. Then me and my brother like walked out of the rabbi's office, and we both looked at each other, and we were like, that was kind of weird, huh? And my brother was like, yeah, that was really freaking weird. And like that to me is like dealing with loss. You never know what emotions you're going to touch. And yeah, so that was when Maury passed. Everybody had these moments stuck up on a wall of all of what loss meant to them, and what part of loss made you laugh, and then we had to try and turn that into a story. And that was beautiful for us. I remember that moment really, really well, that time.
I think as painful and awkward and whatever other emotion runs through people at funerals in Winnipeg are just next level, just because of the climate and the soil. Like a funeral in Winnipeg, like it, you've got to get an industrial, extra commercial uh, cat to dig out the plot. Because not
Yeah.
only is it frozen, Winnipeg soil is so clay.
Yeah.
Like it's just
No, it was brutal, and I remember being out there, and watching the coffin go in, and everyone's freezing, and you get in the car, and all you can do is try and warm up, and everything is just surreal because you're dealing with this loss, and yeah. Anyways, it's the first episode or the second episode of the third season, if people can find it. That dealing them going and sitting Shiva in the house was putting that together as in a writing room, taking everyone's moments and trying to glue something together was very, very touching, and I think it brought the whole writing room and everybody together. So that was a very sweet moment for me. But sorry, the question was talk about the show, and yeah, the show has been one of the best things that ever happened to me. It was a weird thing because it was the first thing I ever pitched to go out to a television, and it went, and which was very strange. A lot of writers who are still my friends say they hated me because of that,
of
because
course.
because since then I I haven't had that much luck, and most writers that's the case. But it takes 5, 6 years, 8 years before they get a show going. And I just like walked in and went, "What do you think of this?" And suddenly it was on the air 2 years later. Yeah.
Does that at least help you getting in the door now, even if you don't get the
Yeah,
buy-in?
I mean, of course it does, and people respect the show a lot because of it. If you watch it now, it more resembles an HBO or streaming show than anything else. And at the time, that wasn't where we were being broadcast on. We were on regular broadcast television, and we were very edgy for our time. And now, when I had my 15-year-old daughter look at it, and I said, "What do you think? Has this aged well?" And she was like, "Yeah." She says, I would watch this," and so that. I think we were way ahead of our time, and we bounced around networks at the time too. We started on City, and then City got sold, and we were too edgy for the new buyers. So then, but HBO Canada was around, so HBO Canada took us, and then, but we'd already shot the second season, so we got to re-edit it, and then the third and fourth season, we were basically told, do whatever you want, and yeah. So, and you can tell the difference just in the second, third, and fourth season, just the look of the show and the feel of the show, because we were given the kind of complete freedom that I don't know very many writing rooms get. Like, it was a real blessing to be in that show, and most of the people who are far more experienced than I am, who are still working in the industry, have said that it was a very unique experience. So there was something. There was a spirit, surrounding us and helping that show get off the air, but that get onto the air. That was great, and it was. I mean, we all enjoyed it, and we were critically acclaimed. So, yay! I get to pat myself on the back for that.
Yeah. So, what sort of magic are you working on now? You're possibly better.
I'm still using my father as inspiration. I have a show that's optioned in Europe and in Canada with two European and Canadian producer called Warpunks,
Mhm.
which is a show. My father was a Holocaust survivor. He was a partisan, and so when the tanks rolled in to Poland, he had a choice to either run home or run into the forest. And he was a young teenager, and he ran into the forest, and he spent the next few years basically fighting the Germans. But when he used to tell me tales about that, like, a lot of it was like, yeah, we were fighting to survive, but I was also trying to get laid. Like, it was, that was his. He was kind of a rebellious youth to begin with.
Hmm.
Got into trouble with the rabbis in the city and in his little town of Poltusk, where he was from. But he was a disruptor, and he told me about a time where he stole a Jeep just to take a girl out on a date. He's hiding in the forest. The Russian underground have trained him to do things, and he goes and steals a Jeep and wrecks it, trying to take this girl out on a date. And so, anyways, Warpunks is kind of about youth, rebellious youth, trying to find their place in the world under the worst of circumstances, which is surviving the war. So that's called
So,
Warpunks. Yeah.
where does a rebellious youth in a stolen Jeep, living in a forest, take a
hmm
girl on a date?
You know what? He just wanted to take her for a ride. As far as I know, he got the Jeep, and you could go some places. I mean, then he wrecked the Jeep, and then he said the Russian sergeant who had trained them beat the crap out of him and said, "You can't do that shit." But they also needed him because he was very good at what he did, which was his job was basically run messages between camps, steal stuff, and blow stuff up, and he was really good at that. So they liked him.
So, I think Alan Levine wrote a book about these people.
But the partisans,
Yeah,
yeah, there's
people
quite a
of the
few.
forest. Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few books on that. And the unique thing about this is just there's a blend of comedy and horror in it that seems to have grabbed some of the producers. And yeah, the focus is really on these teens trying to survive, but trying to also grow up and figure out what life is and what are the important things in life as they survive under horrible circumstances. And that was, my dad, that that experience trained my dad, and you could see his toughness, but his comedy and spirit whenever things went bad and things like that. So he was an interesting dude.
So not quite as wacky as a Hogan's Heroes in
No,
the
no,
same
there'd
vein.
be there'd be a bit more. There's a bit more drama in it than Hogan's Heroes. Let's
Mhm.
put it that way. And I have another Jewish themed show called Locke, which is about a murder that happens in a Satmar Hasidic community that's been being looked at. So that one's that one's fun. And then I've got like two or three other pitches that I'm just working on to get out there. I mean, a lot of what the industry is about is just like having 1,000 ideas so that the producers and networks can pick one, and then you get paid to
Mhm.
write it. So that's it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain to the audience what a Satmar Hasidic group is?
Oh, Satmar Hasidic Jews are ultra religious, very, very strict Jewish. It's a very small sect. There's some in upstate New York. There's some in Montreal. There's, of course, in Israel. They're the ones who are as extreme as you can be in that.
Mm.
And the show Locke that I have is about a woman who basically ran away from all that, became a
Mm.
and ended up being a police officer, and then has to come back to that community to investigate a murder that's taken place, and then
Wow.
reattached and try. And in her life, she has this emptiness that she knows she didn't have when she was with them, but she still can't fully immerse herself back into that society. So she struggles trying to find what the truth is in life and religion, and if there is a God. So
Mm.
that's thematically that's it. But also she's trying to solve a murder. That's the big thing.
Yeah. Is this based on somebody you met, or is this
No,
just something that came to you?
this is something that came to me. There were a couple of news articles about some crimes that had happened in upstate New York, and the thing about those communities and that society is like these people who claim to be so close to God and following God's rules and things, yet they can do horrible things, but yet
Yeah.
they find such joy. Like I've been part of Hasidic Sabbath and holiday celebrations, and the joy they have
Mhm.
celebrating an event and in praising God is stunning. And sometimes I sit there, I go, who wouldn't want to be part of this? Like you walk out of there feeling like everything is possible and there's a lot of joy, but it's, they're human as well, and so they have all their flaws and their interpretations can be flawed and things like that. And that's kind of where Locke what Locke explores.
Well, Mr. K, we are unfortunately almost out of time. I've
Wow.
had a fabulous time talking to you.
Me too. I was so paranoid. I didn't think I was that interesting a person. So I'm glad. I'm glad it seemed to go by quickly. I hope I didn't prattle on too much about things that no one cares about. Yeah.
No, I think that could be a new treatise or treatise.
Treaties. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Or yeah.
I didn't get to ask you. Like I haven't read your book yet, but I want to. I mean, your experience sounds so much more interesting than typing TV shows on a computer. But I guess that'll have to be another conversation, maybe
Certainly.
at a coffee shop somewhere.
Sure. Happy to do it.
All
So
right,
if there is somebody in the audience that has an extra $250,000 they're not doing anything with
or more.
or more, and would be interested in hearing more about your upcoming projects, how do they get a hold of you?
My agent is Ambition Talent here in Toronto, so you can give them a ring. I'm sure you can find them on the internet. I'm also on the internet somewhere, so you can send me an email. I have not yet had the experience of being under a deluge of emails, so that might be great. Like just pour it at me, and if you want to throw money at me, I mean, I'll try and catch it. I'll do my best, but do whatever you want. Those are the best ways. But if you want to be all professional about it, you probably should go through my agent David Ritchie at Ambition Talent.
Awesome. Thank you, Marvin, so much. And
Thank you.
thank you to everybody who's tuned in to the Dead Man Walking podcast. Please like, subscribe, share. I mean, share a lot. And, if you don't ask, you don't get. And have yourself a great week. We'll see you next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye now.